uncontrolled burns. They are called prescribed burns because Colorado knows that the fires that we start on purpose to manage the forest and brush can easily spread on accident, and that's what's happening right now. It's causing evacuations in Larimer County. This particular fire is northwest of Fort Collins near the Glacier View area. The sheriff's office says it started as a prescribed burn near the Boy Scout ranch, and then it ran. Firefighters are working this both from the air and on the ground tonight. I want to show you specifically where we're talking about. Glacier View is southwest of Red Feather Lakes. The Nature Conservancy was over at the Boy Scout Ranch doing a prescribed burn of about 500 acres when things got out of control and moved to the east. Sheriff's deputies don't have an exact number for us of how many people, how many houses are being evacuated right now. They also don't yet have a solid size on the fire. If you've heard of Glacier View, there's a good chance that is because of the 2012 High Park fire, which burned for days. It jumped the Poudre River and it went clear through Glacier View. 60 homes were lost in that fire there. A number of folks decided to stay and rebuild, and tonight again have fire on their doorstep. Some of Colorado's elected Democrats are asking the U.S. Supreme Court to have their back. The Attorney General and the Secretary of State want the court to force Colorado's presidential electors to follow the will of our state and not their own whims. Faithless electors is what they have come to be called. Here's politics guy Marshall Zellinger.
Today, the Colorado Secretary of State's office is appealing a very dangerous court decision to the United States Supreme Court.
This decision in 2016 by one of Colorado's 9 electors, a decision to cast an electoral vote for someone other than Hillary Clinton, has led Colorado to ask for an opinion from the U.S. Supreme Court.
When people voted for president in 2016 in Colorado, the majority of Coloradans believed they were voting for the Democratic Party's nominee, Hillary Clinton. They didn't believe they were voting for Michael Baca, for example, to do whatever he wanted. And that's the principle that's at issue.
But when you vote for president, you're really not choosing the candidate. You're really choosing the 9 selected delegates from that candidate's party to ultimately cast their electoral college votes. You just assume it will be the candidate that was on the ballot. In Colorado in 2016, elector Michael Baca chose not to cast his electoral college vote for Hillary Clinton, so he was removed and replaced. 2 months ago, a U.S. District Court of Appeals determined Colorado should not have done that, and that he was free to vote for whomever he wanted. But in Washington state, where electors were fined for choosing someone different, that state Supreme Court ruled that Washington was okay to punish them.
There's a different rule of law in Washington than there is in Colorado. That's not healthy. This is a basic constitutional principle that deserves a nationwide uniform standard.
And because of the split decisions by a U.S. Court of Appeals and the Washington State Supreme Court, Weiser and Griswold believe that will cause the U.S. Supreme Court to fast-track their request.
Here in Colorado, if someone casts their vote, they should expect and be assured that that vote is going to affect the outcome of the U.S. presidential election.
So here's our timeline. Colorado filed the request for the Supreme Court to take up this case today. On any of their Friday conferences, the justices can decide whether or not to accept. If they do, the state will be notified. Phil Weiser believes it could happen and be heard by winter or next summer in time to have an impact prior to the 2020 presidential election.
Hear this case, hear it when we want to hear it, and the Supreme Court could just say, nah.
No thanks. It's like, I picture like asking my parents for something and they're just like, get out of here. It's possible, but because of that conflict, Weiser believes because there's a conflict, the justices will be like, yeah, we should probably listen to this.
All right.
But they don't have to.
Well, we'll keep an ear out to see if they do. Thank you, Marshall. Adams County remains at the forefront of innovation and elections. Just when you think that county is running out of ways to mess up how we vote, they come up with something new. Last year, it was losing a truck full of ballots. This year, 17,000 voters in Aurora got a ballot telling them to pick one at-large council person. They actually get to pick 2. Oh, Adams County. But for real, though, this is the issue. Adams County Clerk Josh Ziegelbaum, who's a Democrat, elected to replace the Republican clerk who was in charge when that truckload of ballots disappeared. Ziegelbaum says he takes responsibility for this error. His office, as well as the Aurora City Clerk, both signed off on the final ballot that included the error. The ballot that incorrectly tells voters to pick one at-large councilperson rather than 2. They're rushing out corrected ballots, but voters have to vote the entire corrected ballot, not just that messed up race.
When we first got it from the city, the certification said vote for 2. And when it was entered in for the proofing process, it got switched during that period of time to say vote for one. It is very, very, very important that when you receive your second ballot that you do vote the entire length of the ballot, not just the one question surrounding the Aurora City Council at-large race.
I'm going to repeat this again because it's a mess. If you live in the Adams County part of Aurora, you need to vote all of the second ballot you receive, all of the races. You need to do that whether or not you sent in the first ballot. The cost, other than voters' frustration and trust, is going to be about $20,000 to reprint the ballots. It occurred to us today that elections in Adams County are kind of a goat rodeo, which is ironic because if you watch next, you know that I won this ribbon at an actual goat rodeo in Adams County. Second place, 2 years in a row. I had come to grips with what happened, but, well, now I'm thinking I should ask for a recount. I don't know. We're getting some feedback on the truth test of an ad about Proposition CC. That's the ballot measure that would let the state override the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and keep the tax refund that you would get under Tabor. A bunch of you asked for clarifications and more information on Prop CC. And since you have your mail-in ballots already, let's dive in.
A vote for Prop CC is a vote to let the state keep and spend tax money that otherwise would be refunded to you under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. William and Thornton asked us to make clear this is just the Tabor part of your refund, not the refunds you get if you overpay state taxes. Absolutely correct, William. Sully and Gunnison asked us to make clear it is forever. And Jim emailed, there's no time limit on how many years the state can keep the money. Both of you are absolutely correct. Prop CC allows the state to keep your Tabor refunds indefinitely, unless the legislature changes that. The money would be spent on schools and roads. Tom in Highlands Ranch wrote to note, nothing guarantees that the legislature won't defund those programs to the tune of whatever Prop CC provides. Yes, that's correct, Tom. Prop CC only dictates how the state would spend your Tabor refund, not how it spends other money. And lastly, Carolyn Littleton asks, does Prop CC affect the homestead property tax exemption, the one for disabled veterans and seniors? No, it does not.
I'm hoping that additional information, those clarifications are helpful, and we honestly do appreciate it when you point out stuff in our reports that's unclear, or if you have additional questions beyond what we've covered, so please keep those questions coming. You can always reach us at next@9news.com via email. I do read each and every one of those emails. Colorado's Democratic Senator Michael Bennet would have made a baker's dozen on the presidential primary debate stage last night, but Bennet didn't make the cut. It was plenty crowded because 12 candidates did make it up there. Bennett's campaign, his poor, mostly forgotten campaign, is still plugging ahead. The Bennet team tells us that he's been visiting Iowa and New Hampshire ahead of the caucuses and the primaries there. His campaign previously said that they plan to stay in no matter what, at least through Iowa and New Hampshire. So we know that human traffickers are targeting kids in Colorado. We know that it's tough to catch and prosecute those people. The Denver District Attorney's Office says it's been working on about 80 of those cases since 2017, and only 17 of the 80 have ever been settled, which means somebody pleads guilty, they are convicted, or the case gets tossed out. Meanwhile, children continue to be victimized. The Tennyson Center for Children helps us understand who we're talking about.
From our experience, it would be more on the streets. So you would find kids who are homeless or who are moving around late at night on some of Denver's harder streets. A recent report came out with some data that alarmed us because the number of children who are in child welfare and foster care who are now popping in trafficking data is disturbing. In the child welfare sector, it can at times be disproportionately girls. It can disproportionately be children of color.
So you hear him talk about the fact that so often it's young women or girls. It's often involving sex trafficking. This afternoon, Anusha Roy sat down with the Denver District Attorney to talk about why these cases are so difficult and how also it's involving some young men and the construction industry.
I had a case involving a 13-year-old who was trafficked, and I was pretty naive about it and didn't really know there was this sort of dark underbelly in our city.
What is the trickiest part about being able to prosecute a suspect?
They take a lot of resources, a lot of work, because a lot of it now is done through technology. So we have to trace phones and computers.
And is a part of the challenge that sometimes the suspects may not be in Denver, may not even be in Colorado?
Certainly that can enter into it. They may come to Colorado for a while and then leave, or they may be the owner of a business, may not be in Colorado. So we may have to work with other jurisdictions. One of the areas that also is very difficult to investigate is labor trafficking, and we see that a lot in the construction industry and among youth. So we've heard from at least one of our partners that runs homeless shelter for youth that many of the youth talk about being exploited and trafficked in labor. Those are hard to prove because we have to have documentation. We also have to have witnesses that are willing to testify.
Did that problem become worse when it comes to labor abuse in construction, as obviously we are seeing cranes pop up all over the place in the city?
Denver is growing, and with that growth comes the opportunity for more exploitation.
So when it comes to talking about labor exploitation, that includes the kids you may see selling magazines on the street, as well as children involved in selling drugs. We did talk to the DA late in the afternoon, reached out to some different construction associations. We haven't heard back from them yet. It was late in the afternoon at that point. And of course, we will be updating you guys with the story when we do hear back from them.
Yeah, new wrinkle and a persistent problem, Anusha, that it's difficult to really understand the full scope of.
Yeah, so the DA's office gets about 100 calls from people with tips or from potential victims as well. But beyond that, there's not a lot of good numbers. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, including that it's hard for a victim to come forward, but it's also hard for people to spot trafficking if you don't know what to look for. But the victims who do make contact with authorities, they really try to get them connected to resources to help them with their recovery at that point.
Anusha Roy reporting. Thank you so much, Anusha. Today, Colorado said farewell to Ruben Valdez, a name worth knowing in state history. The former Speaker of the State House passed away earlier this month. Valdez was the first Latino elected as our state's Speaker of the House back in 1974.
From Ken Salazar to Lucia Guzman to Federico Pena to Crisanta Duran to Leroy Garcia, Ruben Valdez was the godfather of a long, proud line of accomplished Latino public servants here in Colorado.
Valdez's rich legacy in our state includes his groundbreaking work in bilingual and bicultural education. Ruben Valdez was 82 years old. Colorado Parks and Wildlife would love for us to stop talking about zombie deer. And a curious viewer has us doing the math to find out what could our airport handle at max capacity.
Well, we hit 80 degrees out at DIA earlier this afternoon, a warm day across the entire region. Tomorrow, once again, warmer and windier too. So high fire danger going in and around the high country areas. And then in southern Colorado, the Arkansas River Valley, the San Luis Valley. Been monitoring that fire burning in Larimer County. You'll notice humidity values between 15–20%. The wind's picking up a bit in between about 10 and 15 miles per hour, but it's been a quiet evening here for much of the Denver area. As we go toward this evening, the wind should simmer down just a bit. Mostly clear skies and temperatures cooling off to the 40s, 20s and 30s going way up high. High pressure is around, so this keeps us dry, keeps us warm, it keeps us windy for the next 24 hours until this cold front dives into the state overnight Thursday and into Friday and provides a bit of relief, at least a cool off in the temperature department. Tomorrow, once again, another 80-degree day. We stay in the mid to upper 80s across the eastern plains, 60s and 70s up in the mountains, along with those wind gusts as high as 40 miles per hour. So high fire danger will really be the biggest story for us tomorrow. We have that cool off on Friday, perhaps an isolated afternoon shower. It won't be much. A bigger cool off coming our way on Sunday with a rain-snow mix possible. And then heading toward next week, temperatures once again are on the move. We're back to the 70s by next Wednesday.
Our next question comes from a viewer named Nolan. He'd like to know, how many flights could DIA handle each hour if every runway was operating, every gate was being utilized, and there weren't any delays or technical issues?
Ah, Nolan, you're going to make us do math, aren't you? All right, well, let's get after it then. DIA has 6 runways. The FAA allows a maximum of 32 operations per runway per hour. So that means that DIA, at full capacity, no issues, can handle 192 flights per hour. So technically, There could be 4,608 takeoffs and landings at DIA every day. Flight tracking websites say we typically see about 1,600 flights a day. We always love where your curiosity leads us, so what question should we answer next? Email your suggestions to next@9news.com or get our attention with the hashtag #HeyNext. So I get why we TV news people talk about zombie deer. It's a catchy phrase, but wildlife workers would really like it if we would stop. And what's this? Good family fun for kids. No, look closer. It's not. Sometime over the last few years, it became trendy on the TV news to talk about Colorado's zombie deer. Kind of insensitive to the animals, if you ask me. And Parks and Wildlife really would like everybody to drop that slang for a serious issue: chronic wasting disease.
Chronic wasting disease, or CWD, is sometimes referred to in the media as zombie deer disease. It's very catchy. I can see why people like it, but the reason that we don't love the term so much is because it implies that you can look at a deer and know immediately whether it has chronic wasting disease. The disease is a prion disease, is a neurological disease that is always fatal in deer, elk, and moose when they do get it. And it takes about 2 to 3 years for the disease to take its course. And so a lot of animals look perfectly healthy, but might have CWD. What you typically would call zombie disease, or when it would appear that the animal is listless, is drooling or stumbling around, not aware of its surroundings. That's very late stage of chronic wasting disease. We just want to educate people about what chronic wasting disease is, how they can protect themselves, or what the regulations are in place for it to help manage our herd so that they're healthy for future generations. We're really ramping up what we're doing in terms of testing all around Colorado. We have 78 game management units that are mandatory testing this year, meaning if you harvest an animal during rifle season, you're going to be asked to bring your animal in for testing. It takes about 3 weeks to get your results back, so in that time, you process your animal like normal, and just hang tight is what we're advising people.
CPW offers free testing on harvested deer in the mandatory testing areas. A voluntary test elsewhere is going to cost $25, and obviously any infected animal should not be eaten. We're back with your feedback next. It's a sign that a business in Berthoud is really kid-friendly. You know how kids love to paint, fun for kids. And you know what else is fun for kids? Budweiser is fun. No, bad idea. Budweiser, not fun for kids. No, move the fun for kids to the other side with a ceramic painting. If a sign makes you look twice, email it to us, next@9news.com, or use the hashtag #HeyNext. You get the final word in feedback tonight. Eileen writes in to say, where's the big Colorado water tanker? She's talking about the global super tanker that fights fires. She says it was big news last summer. Seems like with our fires, we could use its help. Eileen, that thing flies all over the world when it contracts with governments. FireAviation.com says it flew back from Bolivia on Monday morning. And Don Stanley says, Kyle, the incorrect phrase "on accident," which you used early in the broadcast, has made its way into spoken English, mostly by younger speakers. Well, thank you for the compliment. We'll see you next time.